Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where social awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me is, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everyone.
And I am your host / Time Lord Wannabe, the Brainstorm of Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing reasonably okay. I'm slightly annoyed at Amazon for once again canceling the order on Brainstormer's Christmas presents, but sooner or later we'll fix that. And on the topic of being annoyed, we have some shenanigans to get into because last week would have been our 300th episode, but we didn't have the presence of mind to mark it, so we're marking it 1 week later than usual.
Yeah, we just had, again, I take full responsibility for that because I've been very busy. Again, it's no excuse, honestly.
It was also the first normal episode in a while because, December being December, most of the news that would have gotten covered in December got shunted to the first week of January as per usual.
Yeah.
So it's not entirely our fault. We probably should have known, but que sera sera.
Okay. So we'll get. To be fair, we only have technically one thing to cover that's in the description, being the video, and we will get to that. But we just wanted to start off on something a little more fun, which is a top 10 superhero movies list. Let me find a corner to decide who goes first. Give me a sec.
I mean, I've got one.
Okay. I'll do heads.
Call it. And it was heads, so you go first.
Okay. Okay, give me 1 sec. Share screen, Chrome tabs. There we go. My number 10 is Hancock from, what was the year it came? I think it was 2008 or 2009.
7, I think.
Let me check. All right. Yeah, 2008.
No wonder it didn't do so well at the box office. What with it kind of being squished in between Dark Knight and Iron Man 1.
Yeah. So this was this was an original movie, superhero movie, which, funny enough, a lot did come out a lot more way back when. Starring Will Smith, who played a superhuman, immortal being that was a total asshole because, well,
I mean, let's put this into a little bit of perspective. Given how many asshole Supermen there are in the year of our lords and ladies 2024,
well, okay. Here's the thing, though.
he's not Homelander, Omni-Man, or Injustice Superman, so it could be much worse.
No, that's fair. I mean, the thing is, like, he's an asshole, but he is still a hero in the movie. Like, it's shown many times that he does good simply on instinct, like to protect others.
He's like if you gave a street thug with a good heart the powers of somebody like a Superman or a Metro Man from Megamind.
Yeah. It's also not like. Here's the thing. It's not a parody. That's very. Like, when you watch a movie, it's clear it's not technically parody, even though, like, it takes jabs at the superhero genre in some form or fashion. But it's pretty straightforward.
It's a comedy, but it's not being satirical or parodying TM. Like again, it's not of The Boys. It's not it doesn't even quite go as far into like that level of parody homage as Jupiter's Legacy does. It does fit more in the lines of Mystery Men, Blank Man, Kick Ass, the earlier version of The Tick with Patrick Warburton. Like it's that sort of movie. It parodies superheroes while also being its own thing.
Yeah, but it's also like a lot more introspective than you'd think. You know.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it's a very smartly written movie, and in a less packed year than 2008 for the superhero genre, I think it would have done a lot better financially than it did. But again, much like Hellboy 2 Golden Army, it had the misfortune of being slammed between Dark Knight and Iron Man 1, so it was essentially crushed between the battle of two titans is the long and short of it, cinematically speaking.
Like, I think it handles the hero's journey because it very much is a hero's journey story, right? For Hancock, the titular character, rather well. Even though it doesn't go about it in the more traditional way.
It also actually does a trope that I dislike, but does it well, which is kind of a washed up hero. Because Hancock at the beginning of the movie, he is he is. One wonders how in the hell one manages to make a superhero homeless, but he basically is all but homeless in the beginning of the movie. But unlike a lot of other aging or washed up superhero movies or superhero IPs that do that trope, his powers aren't waning until later on in the movie because there's a mechanic of how his powers work and how it relates to how the villain's powers work and so on.
Also, sorry, it has an interesting mythology that I wish would have, been developed more through a sequel.
Yeah, it kind again, it's in that same territory as your Mystery Men's, your Kick-Asses, etc., where it's like there's a lot more that could be gone into here, but much like Jupiter's Legacy, it doesn't really get the chance to because, again, it was expensive and it came out in the year 2008 when both major publishers of superhero media finally got off their ass and started to build a thing.
Right.
Um,
I am okay. So I'm sure a lot of people know about the deleted ending, like the alternate ending they had planned originally, but with test audiences, it was scrapped. That was a lot darker. They kind
mhm.
of made Hancock more of a villain because he tries to force himself onto Charlize Theron's character.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I,
I'm
I
kind of
I think especially in the Year of Our Lords and Ladies 2025, we've seen far too many Homelanders in the superhero genre of
yeah.
late, so I think that
So
that aspect, the decision to change that ending aged really well, I think.
I think it also just makes it better, like because it doesn't. I mean, don't get me wrong. Back then, when superhero movies were still kind of in that niche sector of the world or culture,
Yeah, when they were barely even a genre to begin
I
with,
think
yeah.
I think it could have worked because it would have been very unique at the time. But I think I like it personally, just because again, it's more hopeful and inspiring, and uh, I think it just works better for the character that was set up in the movie. Don't get me wrong. I think it also the other ending would have worked as well. But
In theory, but I think it would have tarnished most of the likability that Hancock had. And it must be said that yes, this is basically what if Will Smith but with superpowers. But the likability of Will Smith playing Will Smith is the way it's always been, which
yeah,
is people like seeing Will Smith essentially play Will Smith in things.
yeah,
That's just how that works.
yeah. To be fair, this was like one of the first superhero movies I ever remember watching growing up.
Mm.
Like I just saw it on TV. Um, and so like I was like, so it had somewhat of an impact on me. I think it has impacted me in certain ways in terms of like storytelling and writing when it comes to like superheroes and stuff, and how certain elements can like how I would write the characters and stuff like that.
Hmm. Any particular reason it's so low on your list?
I mean, as good as it is, there are movies on my list that have done a lot better and were a lot more influential in my life when I saw them. Like have inspired me to do a lot of things in like writing and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
it's still a good movie. I enjoy it. I just think there are some other movies that I have seen on my list that do a lot more.
Hmm.
Okay. Let me pull yours up real quick.
Yep.
Give me a sec. Da, 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 da. Is Dalton's number 10?
Yep. Glass. Personally, I guess I'm in the minority here in that I think Glass is better than Unbreakable. A lot of people um seem to think that Glass misses the point of Unbreakable, but I think the thing with that is Unbreakable leans too much into the superheroes as modern day mythology, like Jungian approach to shit. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons I prefer Glass to Unbreakable. Whereas Glass, whereas Unbreakable has Elijah Price, aka Mr. Glass, who, by the way, is probably the single most relatable villain character in any piece of media for me. Um, whereas Unbreakable has Mr. Glass doing a lot of that Jungian infused recontextualization shit, the kind of shit that I have absolutely zero patience for. In a weird way, especially given how David David's arc goes in Unbreakable and how Glass eventually kind of plays the superhero genre a little bit more straight than Unbreakable does, I choose to see that as an artifact of Elijah being miserable for not having found his place in the same way that David feels hollow and empty without knowing his place. I think that Elijah's reliance on the post Jungian deconstructive crap was part of his mastermindedness not being able to come to its full fruition, which is another reason why I really like Glass, because whereas Unbreakable was sort of building the foundations of what could become a superhero universe, Glass is us, the audience, watching a superhero universe kind of start to come to its full fruition in a sense. Um, and and in a way, honestly, for one thing, the Eastrail 177 trilogy, otherwise known as the Unbreakable trilogy, is, in my opinion, the best M. Night Shyamalan has ever managed. And I think one of the reasons why I like the Unbreakable trilogy, and in particular Glass, is it is one of the M. Night Shyamalan movies least reliant on the twist. Like, there's actual world building and characterization before the twists happen, so that instead of, as usually happens with M. Night Shyamalan's movies, it basically being a twist premise in search of the rest of a movie, here you have a movie that has a twist in it, but the twist isn't deconstruction. It's something that actually works in the context of works in the context of the movie, rather than basically pulling a bait and switch at the last possible second, like most of M. Night Shyamalan movies do. Again, this movie also, as per the title, focuses primarily on Mr. Glass coming to his full fruition. And again, I personally find Mr. Glass to be one of the most relatable characters in all of fiction, for me at least. Obviously, a crippled mastermind, not exactly a long walk for me to get in the headspace of, if you can even freaking imagine that. So there's that. And yeah, the entire Unbreakable trilogy is great, but I am one of the few people who will probably tell you that the trilogy actually gets better as it goes along, because Split is a little bit better than Unbreakable for me, and then Glass is a perfect capstone to the Unbreakable trilogy. And honestly, if I had my druthers, we would start to get more movies set in the Unbreakable universe, so that we could see the sort of lo-fi beginnings of the superhero universe that that trilogy sets up come into a more fully well-rounded version of a superhero universe. And I think especially in the era of The Boys, Invincible, Injustice, especially in this era where lived in superhero universes that are also semi deconstructive and semi like commentary laden, something like a sequel set of movies or even a show set in the Unbreakable universe would be amazing, because to the credit of M. Night, and this is one of the reasons I think Glass is actually better than Unbreakable, but I think it's also part of the reason why a lot of people who liked Unbreakable so much don't like Glass as consistently, which is, I think a lot of the artsy fartsy critic types liked the sort of deconstruction and Jungian woo of Unbreakable, and they disliked that Glass played it straighter. But I think, especially given the quote unquote theme of Glass, which is, or I guess in a way, the theme of the entire trilogy, which is the theme of well, I guess there's a couple. One is the broken are the more evolved, and the second is the world needs exceptional people and exceptional things, and that anyone who tries to stifle the potential of extraordinary people should be ashamed of themselves and should be thwarted at every attempt. Given that, I think M. Night has a love and a respect for superhero media that I wish he had brought to his adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender, but he unfortunately did not. But yeah, Glass is probably M. Night Shyamalan's best movie, and one of the best movies in the entire superhero genre for me.
Alright.
Next.
1 second. Also, hello, Giant Turtle. Good to see you. I'm doing pretty good.
Hey, DT. I'm also doing okay.
Alright. Yep. So my number 9 is Unbreakable.
And by the way, we both kind of came to that conclusion independently. We weren't really expecting to do to do one right after the other, although Brainstormer did expect me to have Glass on my list, although he thought it would be higher than it ended up being. But that's more to do with the fact that the movies ahead of it on my list are just better than it. It's not really a slight against Glass. It's just if I'm limiting the best of the superhero genre to 10 movies, then that's some pretty stiff competition.
So, obviously, I'm not discrediting anything you said about Glass. I think it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Full honesty, I have seen Unbreakable far more than I've seen Glass. And
have you ever marathoned the trilogy?
Not really.
Like watching one right after the other? I've always wondered how that fits when you watch one right after the other. I suspect it would fit really, really well because it seems to, but
so my son of a bitch. So I like it on multiple reasons. Again, obviously, because I've seen it more, so I have a lot more like kind of memory of it than Glass, because I saw it like once or twice. I saw it like in theaters once, when it came out, right? So we could do we did.
mm-hmm.
I think we did the review on the stream on the podcast.
I'm pretty sure we did a review on stream when it came out.
Right. But I like it for a few reasons. One, it's actually one of Bruce Willis's. I'm tired. Okay,
I think Will and Willis is what tripped you up there, and we were already we were just talking about Hancock. I think that's what tripped you up there.
So Bruce Willis it's like one of his best performances I've seen. Because it's a lot more understated, a lot more softer. It's just like compared to what I've seen before,
It actually requires him to do like nuanced acting, which I think is something that he doesn't often get called to do nuanced acting. He gets called in to be the generic tough guy. And I think that's one of the reasons that this David Dunn in general is one of his best performances, period.
Right. But also, like, all the characters just feel real too. It's like the writing there is also fantastic because no one feels generic. No one feels one-dimensional. They all feel like people, people I would see on the street or speak to, like that's good. Um, but also, okay, so kind of getting into my more like filmmaker nerd kind of box here.
By all means.
The cinematography is amazing because I think it was obviously a conscious choice by M. Night Shyamalan to have a lot of frames be within frames to look or stylized to look like comic book panels.
Comic book panels, yep.
Yeah. And color, as
Which
much as
is
it
a
is.
bit.
Okay,
Go ahead.
please.
Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say like, and bringing up color. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Bringing up the color, as much as it's sort of desaturated, it's also has like hyper pops of color at times.
If you know the trick going in, which is this is a superhero universe sort of in its gestation phase, and and again, I already gave M. Night his credit for this. If you know that, in a weird way, I think Mr. Glass is almost one of M. Night's self-insert characters. If you know that most of the things that Mr. Glass spouts, either in Unbreakable or I think more especially in Glass, are more or less M. Night's own opinions on the genre, and you know what to look for or are familiar enough with superhero comics to kind of know the like style and or visual and or color cues, you're going to notice exactly what the movie is doing probably before the movie does it, which again I think makes the Unbreakable trilogy M. Night's best work, because unlike in a lot of his other movies where the twist comes out of nowhere just to just to essentially stroke M. Night's ego, here from
It's set up pretty
frame
well.
one until the end of the movie, it makes logical sense. And so rather than the twist being a heel turn or a bait and switch or a turn to left or right out of left field, it actually feels like it's paying off what the movie has been setting up the entire time.
I also want to point this out too. The music. It's so different compared. It's so fantastically different compared to like other superhero scores or like comic book movie scores that I have seen, that I've heard and listened to, even back then too. It just had such a unique personality to it that I think really stole the film. It has some traditional like uproar score, like very triumphant, and that's close to the end of the movie, obviously. But
right,
it also has this like interesting like how to explain it. Urban, I guess, kind of beat to it as well.
Yeah. If this is a superhero universe, then this is sort of the superhero universe's street level beginnings.
And yeah, like I honestly do think Unbreakable is like a good setup for a superhero universe,
And can we talk about can we once again zero in on Mr. Glass for a second, because Samuel L. Jackson has a lot of really amazing roles in his career. I hazard a guess that there are very few movies in which Samuel L. Jackson plays in that he is not a fan favorite in. But it says something when Mr. Glass puts even a lot of his other more fan servicey roles to shame. And I think both in terms of M. Night's own love for the genre and Samuel L. Jackson's love for comics and geekdom and superheroes and stuff, it doesn't surprise me that Mr. Glass is one of Samuel L. Jackson's favorite roles he's ever played. And again, like I say, as a crippled mastermind in my own right here, goddamn, is he ever a relatable character? And yes, I actually know who my equivalent of David Dunn is already. It's something that I figured out pretty much the second I watched the ending of Unbreakable. But that goes into personal stuff, and I won't go into it.
I think that's pretty much all I have to really say about Unbreakable. And again, I do want to point out, again, it's one of those, it's like what, I'll be fully honest, in terms of superhero movies, I didn't get to really see, well, no, that's not entirely true. I remember watching Tim Burton's Batman movies on, DVD back when they had those, really flimsy cardboard, covers, or,
Yeah.
You guys know what I'm talking
about?
The
cases? Yeah, the ones that kind of looked like CD sleeves.
What?
Isn't that the kind of case you're talking about?
No, I know. It's Giant Turtle. Explain what you mean by it being the modern mythology stuff, because unless they are pushing that interpretation, not sure why that's bad. Wouldn't that also get rid of most of the DC comics? I'm not sure what you're talking about, Giant Turtle.
Related to what I said about the Jungian pretentiousness and Unbreakable, that kind of downgrades it for me, I think, is what he's getting at.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm going to short TLDR my resentment for the whole modern mythology thing, and then I'm going to explain or I'm going to allude to what Unbreakable did that kind of rubbed me the wrong way as compared to Split and Glass. The problem with superheroes or modern mythology is it instrumentalizes superheroes or comic book media, and B, it essentially accuses comic books of stolen valor, and it trivializes both mythology and superhero comics. By essentially saying that the value of superhero comics is not unique to themselves, but is in fact just a warmed over rehash of mythology, which, for one thing, does not fucking understand mythology, because as most people who've actually studied mythology can tell you, the things we call mythology in the modern world were once the religions of yesteryear. And one, I don't, for all that superhero comics are quite wonderful, I don't think anyone has ever accused them of being I don't think anyone has ever accused Superman or Batman or any of the other characters of actually existing. And two, the thing that Unbreakable does, which again I think Glass successfully recontextualizes to the point that I don't dislike it as much in Unbreakable now, which is when Mr. Glass is explaining to David how his theory of comics imitating life works, he pulls the Jungian recontextualization cards and the Frankfurt School post-structuralism cards a lot. But again, like I said in my segment on Glass, I think based on how Glass and Split changed the flow of the trilogy a little bit, I think the reason why Elijah's reliance I think the reason why Elijah relies on that kind of Jungian recontextualization um in Unbreakable, but or outgrows it in Glass, is because much like David Dunn is feeling empty and depressed and like his life is unfulfilled prior to meeting Elijah and being sort of let in on what his destiny is. So too, Elijah's mastermind abilities are kind of lying dormant or are being or are as yet underdeveloped in um Unbreakable, and that's why he has to rely on the Jungian artsy fartsy crap. Whereas in Glass, because he has become a more full representation of the mastermind that he was always meant to be, he abandons it because he realizes how small-minded and pretentious the Jungian approach to things is. And I think that's also why a bunch of critical hacks like Unbreakable more than they like Glass. I'm not saying you can't like Unbreakable more than you like Glass, but specifically the class of critics that shat all over Glass and essentially kind of missed the point of it were bitching that they liked Elijah's overly grounded Jungian approach to superhero mythology, quote unquote, in Unbreakable, but they disliked that it was more played straight in Glass. Which I think, if that's your take on what makes Unbreakable better than Glass, quote unquote, then you just wanted something to come and take a massive Jungian Frankfurt School shit all over not only itself, but also superhero media in general. And thus, a lot of people seem to have missed the point of the trilogy in the sense that being grounded is not a default thing in the Eastrail 177 universe. It slowly builds to becoming less grounded as the latent super potential in the universe becomes more actualized, thanks in no small part to the machinations of Mr. Glass. Anyway, moving right along to my number 9. It really, really isn't, DT. It really, really isn't. If you have if you have that take, I'm afraid it's probably because you're using a very postmodern definition of what the word mythology means. And again, when most people use the modern mythology thing, they're using it to instrumentalize and trivialize not only superhero media, but also mythology itself. Which, if it's taken remotely seriously, it should be viewed in relatively the same way as theology or comparative religion is, because most of the surviving mythology we have are things that people actually used to, and in many cases still fucking believe it actually exists. Anyway, my number 9 is Hellboy: The Golden Army. Spoiler alert: both Hellboys made it onto my all-time best superhero or comic book movie list, but I feel like um I very much feel like Golden Army is a massive downgrade from Hellboy 1. Um, in that, um, ironically, I think leaning harder into the mythological aspect of Hellboy rather than the superhero aspect of Hellboy kind of nerfed Golden Army a little bit. And I also think that for all of his love for fairy tales and mythology, Guillermo he kind of hyperfixates on the more positive aspects of Fey folklore rather than doing what I feel like it would have been better had he done, which is leaning into the more horrific, pre-Grimm Brothers Slavic style fairy tales. Um, I think that in some ways it also might have been studio meddling. I feel like the company that made the first two Ron Perlman Hellboy movies might have told Guillermo to lighten up the tone and make it a little bit prettier in Hellboy 2. But again, I feel like that kind of nerfed it a little bit. Having the more darker, super heroic tone in the first Hellboy, I think was a good thing, and I think that Golden Army is kind of missing some of that because instead of staying in the pocket of a supernatural superhero movie, it it leaned a little bit too heavily into fantasy, but not just fantasy, but like overly pretty Disney style fantasy instead of keeping the dark tone and playing fairy tales as the original horror movie or the original scary stories, which much of the original version of fairy tales actually were. Like we think of them as prettified kid stuff now, thanks in no small part to the Victorians and to Walt Disney. And to some extent, even the Grimm brothers took a lot of the sharper edges of fairy folklore out of their version of the stories. And I think that Hellboy 2 probably would have been better served if it leaned more into the pre-Grimm brothers Slavic-esque fairy tales um, than the overly pretty post-Victorian one. Which is funny because having just watched Pan's Labyrinth for the first time over the course of this week because I got it for Christmas, I feel like Guillermo would have been better off if the stuff from Celtic and Fey folklore in Hellboy 2 Golden Army leaned or was more similar to the way that the trials of the Faun are played in Pan's Labyrinth. Which again, I realize again it might have been studio meddling telling him to pull back on the darker edges a little bit to hopefully net it more mainstream appeal. But it may have made Hellboy 2 more mainstream appealing, but in many ways I think it lost the edge and the heart that Hellboy 1 had. But we will see how that stacks up come later down my list. Next.
All right. One sec. All right. My number 8 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Where to start with it? Um, I do think it's a lot better than Across the Spider-Verse, just simply because it's self-contained. Per- it's a good origin story for the character of Miles Morales, who has kind of been done a lot of dirty since for a while now in the comics. Um, Hello, Jonah. Good to see you.
Hey, Jonah.
Um, Not to mention again, like the art style, the animation, all of it is actually really fantastic, well made. I know you're not, and I feel like it's an I feel like I have to put in the obligatory "fuck you, Don" for not liking animation.
It's
Um,
not.
Stop.
It's not that
I
you.
understand your reasoning. I do. It's just
It's
it's
not that I dislike animation. It's that I demand live action be more ambitious and better able to match it.
yeah. That seems like I'm not gonna lie. That does seem like a fair thing. But still, fuck you though. Saying that live action should be better or not, live action that you prefer live action over animation. Just
Yeah, because I'd rather see ideas move from the heads of the people who have them to the most solid and tangible version of themselves possible. It, to to uh,
Don.
to quote my usual like axiom when it comes to this, I'm less impressed when you take something that's already drawn and you make those drawings move than I am when you actually bring them to something resembling reality. And no, that's not a realism point because, as I've often pointed out, most people's definition of realism is just softcore nihilism. I do believe that reality is a more wondrous, more upscaled place than most people do, and I'm sick of people's lack of imagination and ambition crippling the ability to portray the cooler parts of the reality in which we currently find ourselves. In the name, ironically, of realism, which again is just softcore nihilism. Sorry.
Um,
You opened the Pandora's box. You can't be mad at what was inside it.
I think that's kind of the whole point. Also, isn't it vase or jar?
Well, the actual term that described it in the myths were a pithos, which was like a sacred urn or jar that like various offerings to the gods and also the earliest cremated ashes were put in. So
So when I said
technically,
jar, I was technically right.
yeah, I mean the like if we're really going to be that pedantic, then the most correct version would probably be urn. But okay, moving
Which
on.
I did say urn first before I said jar.
Mhm.
Anyway, yeah, it's a fun story. Like it's actually a lot. Like don't get me wrong, Across the Spider Verse isn't bad. Spot was like my favorite thing in that movie, but I think it was a little too ambitious with all the characters. While there were multiple Spider people in Into the Spider Verse, they all felt very unique. They had their each had their having their moments in that movie, and all had very uniquely defined personalities, and which I think was somewhat the point with Across the Spider Verse that they were all very similar in some ways. Not going to get into that, but it's again, it's like a good. I feel like Into the Spider Verse got a lot right in terms of like the Spider-Man mythos, in terms of like how the character overall of Spider-Man is. You know, the leap of faith. Again, the leap of faith scene is just one of my all-time favorite scenes in like any superhero media I've seen. Just how it all is like is the culmination of everything that came before, and it works. Not to mention "What's Up Danger" is like just it's always stuck in my head as a great song.
Sorry, I got distracted by Dragon Turtle's hot take, which I will rebut when it's my turn to speak again.
But also I do. Yeah, it's just I think it's a legitimately good movie. That's one of like most recent superhero movies that's come out, relatively, at least in relativity. Am I saying the word right? It's
Yeah, you said it right. I'm not sure exactly if that's the word you were actually looking for, but you said it right.
okay. Well, what I mean, like, what I obviously mean is like, uh, since like, okay, if we're talking decade, like 2015, well, now 5, 6 years at most in terms of superhero media.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And now that Brainstormer is finished with his entry, I am going to rebut Dragon Turtle's hot take because not only is that wrong, I would argue that it has things exactly backwards. Because again, my approach is let's take ideas into their most actualized form in as tangible a reality as they can be made. Whereas one of the axioms of woke is reality sucks, therefore we should just replace it with a different one, which is very much like I don't again, I'm not disparaging animation. Animation is great, but when you especially in a medium like superhero comics or something that's very heavily illustrated, it is categorically less impressive to take something that is already drawn and make those drawings move than it is to bring those drawings into existence in some meaningful fashion. That doesn't mean we shouldn't stylize things because, again, I think reality has the potential to be grander scale, more epic, and more artistically stylized than most people's definition of realism will allow. But it certainly is not woke to say we should make a better and more efficient use of the tools we actually have in existence rather than literally building a false existence from the ground up, which again, not disparaging animation, but if you want to tar me with the oh your insistence on live action is based on wokeness, well then I'm going to throw that axiom right back at you and point out that animation can be used to replace a reality that the person making the animation doesn't like. If we're really gonna play the wokeness card, I reserve the right to Uno reverse it on you. Because to be impressive is by definition good. I really don't understand that logic at all. Are we going to act like things being impressive is not in and of itself an inherently good thing? Like the opposite of impressive in the strictest sense is something that leaves the littlest possible impression. That's, the root of the word impressive is impression. So like are are you really going to are you really going to play that level of silly buggers with the definition of things just to tar me with the erroneous tag of woke because you know that will piss me off the most? Because I think you're reaching a lot more than I am in this point.
All right, guys. As much as I would love to have this conversation, we got other stuff to don't like this podcast has to keep going. So if you want to
Yes.
continue this like after
The
stream,
show must go on.
okay, just alright. So here's Dalton's number 8, right?
Yeah. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. A lot of people, for some reason, have like hate boner for this movie, and I don't fucking get it at all. There are some people who dislike it for purist reasons, among them Alan Moore, because Alan Moore dislikes it when any adaptations are made to his work, apparently. Then again, if he had his way, V from V for Vendetta would have been an anarcho-communist, so fuck him. And in my defense, I think I am in a similar headspace with this movie as Brainstormer is with Hancock and Unbreakable, in that I watched this at a time that was very formative for me, because this was an age where I was reading a lot of the great illustrated classics books. And so the idea of what if we took characters from like Victorian literature and sort of made an homage to the penny dreadfuls, dime novels, pulp magazines, and so on, that sort of began the superhero genre by turning those literary characters into Victorian superheroes. That was a very easy sell for me at that point in my life. And I have read and do actually own Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but here's the thing. I think many of the creative decisions made in the movie version of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen are better and less pretentious and hipstery than a lot of Alan Moore's decisions. Like, for example, in the movie version of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Mina Harker is a vampire because, she was bitten by freaking Dracula, so of course she would be. Whereas in the comics, she's more of an Amanda Waller or Cecil Stedman type manager for the team than an active participant in the team, because is something my experience card, which I don't think works at all. There are liberties taken with both the literature and the comic, although some of those liberties were made by the comic first. For example, Mr. Hyde is essentially the team's Hulk in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and there's not really much basis for that in the actual Robert Louis Stevenson novel. That said, I'm willing to overlook that because it's a more literal translation of what Mr. Hyde is supposed to be, which is essentially the beast within within any given man. And again, like I say, there's a lot to like about this movie. There's a lot of really, tragic horror stories of how terrible it was, in terms of its production history. And apparently, Sean Connery, who plays Alan Quartermain in this, hated working on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He played Alan Quartermain, so much that it literally cost him to retire from acting. and his personal feelings and choices are his own, I suppose. But as a major fan of this movie and of the Victorian literature that it is very much homaging, I don't see, at the very least, to the credit of everyone involved, everyone here gives amazing performances that do not belie the or do not imply the tortured production history this movie apparently had. I really wish it had gotten the sequel that it had planned, because they were planning for a trilogy. And for those that don't know, James Moriarty is the villain in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and the second set of villains were going to be the Martians from War of the Worlds. And I really wish that movie existed. But again, it was such a torturous movie to make that that it caused Sean Connery to retire from acting. So I guess that was inevitably going to not be the case. But like I said, the wear and tear that happened behind the scenes doesn't show in this movie, and that's one of the things that I will credit it to, is that for all of the apparent issues it had behind the scenes, you don't really see those in the movie. If you're a fan of Victorian literature, if you're a fan of like the penny dreadful dime novel pulp era of superheroes, or if you're just that much of a like of I would say nerd, but I think in this case, like, the type of geek you'd have to be to like this movie as much as I do is probably more akin to like a goth or a um or like a theater emo sort of person. But if you're that sort of person and you haven't watched this movie, I highly recommend you give it a watch. And despite Alan Moore's dislike of the fact that people decentralize his personal ego when they make adaptations of his work, I would argue, and yes, I've read the comics, that League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is more of an adaptation of the concept behind the comic than it is the comic, and B, as a result of being more of a adaptation of the premise behind the comic than the comic, in some ways I think it's better than the comic for what it is. It's essentially Victorian literature characters as a Justice League, or I guess a better analogy would be like a Mystery Man or Justice Society, thereabouts. But moving forward.
Give me 1 sec. My number 7 is Guy High. So I'm not gonna lie, I think this might have been my first ever superhero movie I watched, or at least one of the first.
I guess you could have come across Tim Burton's Batman after you came across this movie. But
I really can't.
I do know several of the movies that were already on your list came out well before this one.
I mean, if anyone, I get that Dragon Turtle. I still think it was cool. It's cheesy, you know. It's the early 2000s Disney Channel original movie, so
Yeah, it was inevitable that it was going to that it was going to have at least a little bit of cheese to it.
But I mean, I think honestly, compared to the movies at the time, even like the other Disney superhero movie, which came out like a little before this one, I believe. I don't remember
I
how
think
long.
it was. I think it was more like a decade or so that Up and Away came out before Sky High.
Hold on. 2000. And Sky High
Okay,
came out in 2005.
okay, so more like half a decade between them. I thought that Up and Away was older, but that might be my bad.
Uh, I think it's just like it captured like a lot of like fun, like I don't know. Part of me wants to say it kind of had like a Silver Age comic feel to it in some regards. It was very much a superhero story, like in terms of like classic comic books with like the plot and stuff. Um, I don't know. I might have to rewatch it again because I could just be blocked out. I could just have like rose-colored glasses on it. I realize it's not a perfect film. No movie is, but honestly, I do think it handled like superhero school story pretty well.
Especially considering that there wasn't that much in that like subgenre at the time. Like I know superhero movie kind of did it parodying the X-Men a little bit, but I think that's the closest thing at the time we really had to superhero school type stuff.
Oh yeah, Zoom. That was actually not bad. I like that one. It was fun.
I'm kind of in the same place with Zoom as I am with Sky High, which is they're both very fun. I think I like Sky High better than I like Zoom, but I don't think I would put. I'm not sure where I would put Sky High in terms of um like favorite superhero movies. It it definitely probably wouldn't be in my top 10 though. I think top 50 maybe if I had to put it somewhere. Um then then somewhere in the lower part of the top 50 probably would be where I would stick it. But again, there's like a 4 year gap between me and Brainstormer, so things that I was already well into like my teen years um for are his childhood, so that probably skews the difference a little bit.
All right. And in terms of costumes, I think like the superhero costumes that we see and supervillain ones like for Royal Pain and stuff are actually pretty well done because
Oh fuck,
they're
my phone's dying.
okay. What I was gonna say was but what I was saying was like for the costumes, for the ones we see, I know there aren't a lot shown in the movie, but it's they're actually pretty good. Like weirdly enough, I could see some. I honestly kind of think some costumes that the MCU has done kind of seem somewhat inspired by them, but the costumes also kind of have like Sky High costumes, kind of have a obviously like a lot more traditional, like very superhero esque style to them. You know, like almost spandex, but kind of have the body armor and stuff built in and stuff. You know. I also would say uh, the characters aren't bad. I mean, sure they're pretty much like standard. Um, Pretty much standard like archit character tropes in like high school settings, but I do think again they're done rather well, like acted pretty well. Um, yeah, I don't really have hmm. No, I agree, Giant Turtle. I'm not stupid in that regard. Well, I'm not ignorant to that in that regard. I'm just very good, Journal. Um, yeah, I don't really have anything else to say in terms of Sky High. It was just a fun movie. You know, I enjoyed it readily, or I enjoyed it greatly. Uh, okay. Phone and friend.
Okay. Hopefully it works now. Apparently my phone died and that somehow fucked with my internet connectivity and I had to fix that too. So hopefully we're back in some kind of order. Hopefully.
All right. Okay. Jonah Arts hit me with a riddle, and you're smart, so riddle one: if you had a pair of shoes, one of red with green laces and one of blue with orange laces, you have a couple of extra laces: white, black, yellow, and pink. What would be the connection between each, and how many pairs of shoes do you have?
Okay, wait. So run that by me again.
If you have a pair of shoes, one of red with green laces and one of blue with orange laces, you have a couple extra laces: white, black, yellow, and pink. What would be the connection between each, and how many pairs of shoes do you have?
Um as far as I can tell, that's only one. Because nobody said anything about the shoes matching each other. You could very easily just be describing one pair of shoes and some extra laces.
See, I would never guess that.
because you've got one shoe. You could have one shoe that's blue with orange, and one shoe that's red with I forget what the red shoes had.
Green.
Yeah, you could just as easily be wearing one shoe that's red with green laces and one shoe that's blue with orange. Is that the correct answer for the riddle that you were asking, Jonah? Okay, half the answer. Connection. The connection, as far as I can tell, is something related to color theory. Because of how red and green contrast and how blue and orange contrast. As for the other colors, they can all be all the colors of the laces can be used to contrast the color of the shoes and the color of the other laces. So my answer for the connection is something related to color theory. I don't know specifically what related to color theory you're looking for, though.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I actually in fact did get it in one. I just forgot about the connection part for a second there. Hooray!
Yep. Okay. Give me 1 sec. Pull up Dalton's number 7. There you go.
Black Adam. Yeah, this movie is another one of those that people sleep on for inexplicable reasons. A lot of the criticism against this movie is it being quote unquote derivative, because it seems to take the best scene from various different other superhero movies that took place or that were released in the last 10 years or so, and it borrows those unique scenes or those unique mechanics, and then like duplicates them 2 or 3 times. And yes, I am fully aware that one of the reasons why I am biased in favor of this movie is because it is the closest thing we have to a Justice Society movie, and it is the first movie live action appearance of Dr. Fate, and they didn't bother as much with the possession retcon, which meant it was a decent adaptation of Dr. Fate, so that definitely does warrant some that definitely warrants some notation of my bias. But yeah, other than that, there's just so much good going on in this movie, and it works on so many different levels that I don't see a world in which it doesn't at least become a cult classic. It definitely has its flaws, and of course it's all but redundant now because shortly after this, DC abandoned the soft reboot approach to its universe entirely and decided to do a full-on reboot with James Gunn, and that's a shame. And yes, I also somewhat hold against it the fact that Kent died at the end. Yes, he heroically sacrificed himself, and yes, the wise mentor wizard character has to die because trope, or because of narrative structure and shit. But I do get slightly annoyed when people trivialize the adoptive father-son relationship that Naboo and Kent Nelson have, and B, do what I call playing musical chairs with the helm, as though the helm is the most important part of the character, which it isn't. So there's that. That's why it's not higher on the list. That, and its aforementioned imperfections when it comes to writing. But if you're looking for a movie to sum up all the things that was awesome about the previous decade of superhero movies, this is that movie. Also, I want to hold something against Marvel for a second here. Dr. Fate acted more like the wise wizard that he's supposed to be in one movie where he wasn't even technically the main character than Doctor Strange has for the... How many movies and shit has he appeared in now? 5, I think? Because we have 2 of his
5.
actual... Yeah, 2 of his actual
Oh, wait,
soon-to-be...
hold on. Doctor Strange, Thor Ragnarok, Infinity War, Endgame, Far From Home, Multiverse of Madness.
No Way Home.
Wait, whatever. I don't give a shit. You know which one I meant? I mean, I don't give a shit about MCU Spider-Man.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
You are as yet disappointed with how they've handled him.
All right. Hold on. Okay. I would say 6 or 7, if my approximation is right.
Okay, yeah. So, his first movie, Ragnarok, Infinity War, Endgame, if we're counting those as 2 separate movies. Then No Way Home, then Multiverse of Madness. I think that's as much as he's appeared in, other than a couple episodes of What If. So I think 5 is still correct, but I could be wrong. Regardless, point being, Dr. Fate in this movie behaves much more like the scholarly, world-weary wizard than Doctor Strange has as yet demonstrated his ability to. He's getting there, but again, Dr. Fate managed this in one movie. We're 5 or 6 or 7 instances of Doctor Strange in with regard to the MCU, and he still hasn't gone full world-weary wizard scholar character yet. Which is a shame, and I will hold that against them a little bit.
All right. Okay, let me move on to the next one. All right. So my number 6 is Project Power from Netflix.
I will say of all the ones on your list, I think this one surprised me the most.
Really?
Yeah, just because I didn't realize you liked it this much.
Yeah, it's a pretty good movie. I thought I made my like of it pretty clear when we were reviewing the trailers, and we even did a review for the movie.
Right, but I also know your rules when it comes to movies, and I don't recall you saying that you ever got choked up or were on the verge of tears at any point during this movie. And I thought that was one of your criteria for goodness generally.
It usually is, but I mean, to be fair, no. The thing was if it elicits an emotional response from me than anything. And Project Power did do that, specifically with the one scene with Jamie Foxx's character towards the end when he took the power pill and used his powers. That got me a bit, with the music and stuff. That was pretty cool. But it's just a really unique I want to say it's kind of a unique take on the superhero genre, or at the very like comic. Well, no, yeah, it's superhero genre. Um, because it's very much like a how to say this. It's a crime noir. It's kind of a crime thriller in some ways, but it does it in such an interest. It takes the genre of the movie and adds the superhero thing, and I think it really enhances that. And again, it's got good music, it's got good cinematography, acting's pretty good all across the board. Um, it's just a really unique concept with like pills that give you superpowers based off it. Well, it's also like a trouble. It's a roulette kind of thing because you don't know what kind of power you're going to get, and there are side effects to it, and there's also a possibility that if you take the pill, you're going to die. So I think it just added a really interesting mixture because it's not just it's not just anyone can take it and get superpowers. There's cost to having it and stuff, and so.
In answer to your riddle, Jonah, I'm going with the man who tipped the pail over was Jack, because presumably when he fell down, if he was the one carrying the bucket would have tipped over, and or it's possible he could have like bumped his head against it while he was tumbling. So my answer to your second riddle is Jack. Especially because Jill would, in theory, I suppose, be inclined toward wanting to catch her brother, one hopes.
Yeah. Also, I think Project Power, like to end it, I think Project Power does realism rather well. And by realism, I also mean, well, I both mean in the sense of what we've kind of collectively agreed realism to be like it works in universe, right? Like, but also realism in the contemporary sense of like the superpowers and stuff. It shows the consequences of those kind of powers. It shows it shows like people are trying to like if you could sell superpowers, yeah, it's just like that kind of corruption and stuff like that. It's a lot of interesting stuff. Is like what I'm saying. It's like, and I kind of wish they done sequels, but with how the story went, it like all the characters kind of ended their story and stuff. Like no one really needs to go on.
I feel like this would have been a good pilot for a TV show, though.
Yeah, that's true.
We could have gotten multiple people using the pills and shit. Question though, would you take the pills if they existed?
That is a good question.
That is why I asked it.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd be totally terrified if it would kill me. But I don't know. I mean, I would try it. I would have trouble like swallowing the pill because it's been hard for me to take pills.
He has a weird gag reflex thing, folks. He doesn't swallow pills well.
Thank you for phrasing it like that.
Ironically, I wasn't even trying to do a phrasing thing that time.
Subconsciously, I think you did, but
I don't think so. I think that was actually me making an innocent comment and you reading into it that time. In if anyone's curious what my answer to my own question would be, the answer is no. And I don't even care about the possibility of dying thing. I care about the fact that the powers are randomized, and I would never. I I would rather avoid taking the pills entirely than risk getting a power that I don't want.
Oh, Jonas says, "Good guess, but not the answer." I was I was thinking the man was called Pale Water.
I guess that could work if you look closely at the way it's phrased. It's pale o water, not pale of water, so that could in theory be a guy's name.
Am I right, Jonah? But also, isn't that the okay half right? Hmm. Yeah, because that's not the way you spell pale, like in terms of like a bucket. I think.
No, that's how you spell pale. The other kind of pale is like skin tone, which is PALE.
Hmm. Yeah, but the yellow water was also a tip there. I am curious what the other half is, though.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm confused because I would have thought that either mine was right or that you got it right because I didn't think much of the oh water because Jack and Jill is a nursery rhyme, so it doing that in like a medieval style poetry thing, it didn't trigger in my head as something suspicious. But then once you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I guess that could be a thing because O could also be like an Irish name.
right. Okay. Reread it carefully. Okay.
Jack fell down and dumped his head, not bumped. Joe went up and caught the man knocking.
Okay. We'll get back to that. Like we still got a video to do too, so
We do indeed, and we
yeah.
still have the rest of the list to do as well. So, because we did 10 each.
Probably should 5 now. I'm thinking. You're number 6.
Yeah, Captain America: The First Avenger. Again, me having controversial opinions, but I think that the first Captain America is the best of the trilogy. And again, this is probably, at least in part, my bias in favor of like Golden Age comics in particular. And the other aspect of why I like this movie so much is it pulled off something that is very hard to do, which is it made me interested in a character that I don't care about or that I didn't care about prior to watching said movie, because I had virtually no interest in Captain America as a character prior to watching First Avenger, and it successfully managed to make me interested in a character that I previously had basically just written off. And that's hard to do, so it gets extra props for that. So, one, it's the best of the trilogy. Two, it's a golden age pastiche, which is awesome. I wish both major comic movie companies would do more of them. And three, it managed to make me like or become invested in a character that I didn't care about. So, and moreover, that I actively disliked Captain America prior to this, because in more recent stories he's played more as the tough, no nonsense soldier, rather than the character who most strongly resembles Superman in Marvel. And this version of Captain America, obviously it continued through the other two movies as well, but I maintain that the first one is the best of the trilogy. It focused on Captain America being that paragon of innocence and purity that makes him relatively analogous to Superman. Whereas later on in the comics they wrote him more as the grizzled, tough, World War II era soldier, and I think in that way I realized, thanks to Captain America the First Avenger, that they were kind of writing Cap out of character, because he is supposed to be that paragon of innocence and purity and shit, a la Superman. And this might come from me reading a lot of 90s era shit prior to this, but a lot of the comics in and around the Civil War arc did not write Captain America well, and so they made me annoyed with his character. But this movie successfully managed to make me go, oh, this character's actually a lot more interesting and a lot more likable than he's written in more recent comics. Fun. Moving on to your number 5.
All right. Give me one sec. Yep. Okay. So I've thought about this movie a ton of times, but it was only until recently I started to really. I saw some old clips of it on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
My number 5 is Mystery Men.
Out of curiosity, did you see those clips in the YouTube short thing?
No, I just randomly thought of them and looked them up, watched a few.
Well, that's good. I
Yeah.
just know that a lot of movies get broken up into YouTube shorts lately, so I wondered if that was where you had found it.
Yeah. So Mystery Men is a, hold on, I just want to make sure I have it. Uh, 1999, so it came out the year I was born.
Jeez.
It's 25
Thank
year
you
old.
for once again making me feel very, very old.
Well, one thing I think it's actually like one of the better parody movies, because it kind of is. I mean, it is based off. I fix the phrasing. Okay. Uh, Again, we'll get to that in a sec, Jonah. Just um, it's a pretty good like it was parodying obviously like the '90s superhero movie, like in terms of like style and everything. And I think it did really well. Actually, like I'll be honest, I kind of wish, in terms of the stylization and stuff, we go back to like the '90s movies, like the Joel Schumacher stuff, and how the cities and stuff looked, because it was so grand, so extravagant, so cool, in my opinion. Um,
Mhm. Sorry, Dragon Turtle keeps freaking baiting me while you're in the middle of your tirades. I don't know why that is, but okay. I will reserve my commentary of his calling me out for the checks notes third time tonight for no good goddamn reason until after you're done.
all right. Um, while it does make fun of superhero tropes, like there's an express thing talking about like a disguise one of the heroes uses of being just glasses, but other people, like one guy calls it out, but everyone else says it doesn't make sense because the guy couldn't see if he's wearing glasses. Uh, but like it's funny, but it's also heartfelt. Like it's got like, and everyone is playing it straight. Actually, it's not like the boys. I guess is the way I say it, is like uh is that they don't make fun of every little thing in terms of superhero stuff, because yeah, it's hmm,
In
I'm
in
sorry.
other words, they parody it, but they do so in a like loving, sincere way rather than a "girl, we hate this" way.
Yes, very much.
Okay. I figured that was what you were getting at. I just wanted to help you kind of put it to better
Yeah,
words,
I
I
was,
guess.
my brain was having like a misfire there. I was trying to find the words,
Yeah, that happens.
but and like to be fair, these like in their universe, a lot of these guys are supposed to be like kind of I think C-list or maybe D-list superheroes.
Hmm.
Um, and it's very much an underdog story for them throughout the movie, and like how they become like become the heroes of the day, you know. Um, and also like I love how like, and again, like we've talked about this a lot, but I always love when it always feels like a lived in world, like there's always history there that you don't see, but it's there.
Right.
Like
Again,
how
it's a shame that Jupiter's Legacy came out after The Boys, because had it come out before The Boys, I think people would be more inclined to be fond of that than they are The Boys.
yeah, I God, that show was robbed.
Yeah, really, really badly, actually.
Yeah.
But
Um
mm,
and every character feels, I mean, like Alan Cummings as the spleen, whose ability is to, well, he was cursed by a gypsy woman, as he states in the movie, and because he lied and said she farted, and basically cursed him with a uh, super fart that basically can knock people out with one hit, and it's also directable. Like he can aim it too. So
which, in a weird backdoor way, does, I suppose, answer what is always my first question: is where are my magic users at?
yeah,
Although I feel like as far as gypsy curses go, she must have been having an off day. I feel like there are much more like ironic sort of vindictive monkey's paw punishments someone like that could have undergone. I would have gassed him to death with the smell of his own fart if it were me, but that's just me.
You got issues, man.
I'm sorry. As a magical practitioner, I have to speak up for our fucking pride here. And like there are rules and standards for this kind of ironic curse punishment bullshit.
Drangel's asking if you hexed his laptop.
No, DT, I did not. I in Dresden Files terms, I guess I would be classed as a minor talent because most of my technology fuck up aura goes to fraying the shit out of my phone cords. Which is also the reason why my phone died earlier, because my phone is at that phase where it doesn't like to keep a charge unless it's in a very particular angle and the cord is held just right. So yeah, that's most of the limit of my Dresden Files Murphy aura, or yeah, Murphy's Law aura, not to be
Right.
confused with Karen
Um,
Murphy, who is the character who will soon become a fixture in Brainstormer's freaking wet dreams if he ever gets that far.
okay. I also like how like all the characters, like all the actors, play the characters straight. You know.
Yeah, it's they're not being they're not being they're not mugging for the camera in terms of like the nudge nudge wink wink nod nod shit.
No, not really. Um. Yeah. Again, this is like one of those early movies I remember watching as a kid that I think kind of helped me get into superheroes and made me like look at superheroes in a specific way that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm always looking for the angle that makes like any superhero I create or work on. I always try to make like certain that there's like a certain element of them that pops out that is specific to them. You know, it's like what like if and when this like becomes a big thing, these characters can be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's about it for Mystery Men.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Which I believe means it's my turn to do five.
Yeah, give me one sec.
Uh, yeah. My number five is Avengers Infinity War, but before we address that, I will address the thing that I said I was going to address when it was once again my turn to talk. As for the times that you've called me out tonight, Dragon Turtle, there was you and Brainstormer kind of tag teaming me on the whole animation thing. Then there was the literary or the labor theory of value thing, which, to be fair, that was my B. My brain had a dyslexia moment where I saw that as the literary theory of woke, and therefore that was my B. But for the record, you're still wrong with regards to the whole labor theory of value thing, because I don't care how much work you put into a thing. I care where that work is actually, to what end or in what context that work is being put, and the quality of the end result. Um, but yeah, no, I don't particularly care how hard it is to make a thing. I care if the work you put into the thing actually results in the thing being good. I'm more interested in scale, ambition, and imagination slash creativity. Which again, that's why it is more impressive, at least by every standard that I can think of, for someone to take something that's already drawn or illustrated or animated and bring it into like something resembling a tangible reality. And not because derp realism, but because to sort of draw down a creative idea like a lightning rod draws lightning and making it a tangible reality that someone can, see as tangible is more impressive than just here are some drawings, let's make those drawings move. Anyway, on to Infinity War. Um Infinity War was probably the last great Marvel movie, insofar as any of the MCU movies can be called great, in that it actually managed to do what Endgame would later fail to do utterly, which is it actually paid off all the buildup that had been going in the MCU up until that point and added new things to it besides. And it was much better at how it utilized its like in-universe mechanics and its characters than Endgame will ever hope to be, because Endgame was a glorified clip show that barely even bothered to keep even hypothetically consistent time travel mechanics, and it massively underused basically every character in it. But Infinity War did everything right that Endgame did wrong, and that is why it is number 3 on my or number 4 on my overall MCU ranking list, and therefore, even when I'm ranking all.
Hello? Can anyone else hear Dalton? Because I can't. Okay, and I think, yeah, he did. Okay. Oh, we're gonna wait for him to return. Whatever that is. Yeah, probably a phone thing, Giant Turtle. So how you guys doing? How's everyone doing in chat? See, I'm gonna be honest, Jonah. I am not that smart to be able to figure out the whole thing. I'm lucky enough that I figured out the pail of water being the guy, sort of. So, that's good to hear, and I hope you find a job soon, man. I'm doing good. I'm not gonna lie. My job's been fucking stressful as fuck, and it's been a killer on my back. So, and also I'm just like super tired. Hence why I haven't really been really reading stuff or doing anything recently. Just been too tired too. So, um, and I understand that, Jonah. I've had to do that a lot of times too. Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, you're probably gonna have to deal with that too in the afterlife. So I appreciate that, Jonah. I yeah, like yeah, if he figures it out, yeah. Eh, or if he tries to at least. I actually an old channel I used to have. It's still out there on YouTube, and you can check it out. I just haven't posted any videos on there, but I did like a 4-part video series pitch rewriting Endgame, um, which was the general idea of swapping out a bunch of characters that were blipped that had a lot more story potential. That is also uh, yeah, the Chinese mythology or mythos super crazy. I've done some brief look into it. So yeah, because I agree. Like Endgame was weird. Like it had its moments in there, but it's just super. It just feels like really tonally inconsistent. Am I the only one who thinks that, or but the end game I had come up with, if I remember the lit, because this was like years ago. It was kind of like maybe a little after Endgame had come out. To remember, yeah, that's true. So I mean, I can pitch you guys my idea, and you can tell me if it's good or not. Like better than the original Endgame. Uh, so the idea was that, well, for one thing, I would have had Infinity War end with a flash of white after Thanos snaps to make people guess who got snapped. It flows into the version of Endgame I had thought of. Um, with obviously the post credit being Thanos taking a seat and watching the sunrise at that farm of his, right? Um, the end game I had thought of, like in my rewrite, was it's okay. If I'm just so you guys have the list of characters, because I'm gonna be fully honest, Infinity War, like when those movies happened, the thing that drove me mostly was the character interactions, right? What I liked most about those, more so than the actual plot, was like characters interacting with each other. But that's just me. So if I remember, again, it's been years since I wrote this, so my mind is a little foggy on it. Uh, it was like the original Avengers were snapped out of existence. And no, I'm not going to call it the blip because I think that name is absolutely dumb and stupid. The snap has more of a punchy weight to it and dramatic overtones. So I'm going to call it that. Um, so it was Ant Man, like Scott Lang Ant Man, uh, Bucky Barnes, Falcon, Spider Man, Black Panther, Rhodey, Scarlet Witch. Hawkeye, Hulk, Star-Lord, Nebula, and Rocket. And that was supposed to be kind of like the quote-unquote new Avengers during that post-snap era. And they were going to be actively hunting Thanos to get the stones. So I'm not going to lie. In my version, it would have just been a full year, effectively. Because to me, that team would have been a lot more proactive than the original Avengers. And plus, I'm going to be fully honest. The reason why I have those characters specifically is because I think all of them have more story to tell in terms of the snap than the originals, than the like original lineup Avengers. I'm going to be fully honest on that. And Thanos, who we would have had, not like the time travel Thanos for whatever reason that was stupid in my opinion. It would have had. Yeah, I agree. That's stupid too. Giant turtle. Hey, Don.
Hello. My camera's off because I'm having to hold my phone literally goddamn sideways so that it keeps a fucking charge. So rather than subject you all to me being projected from a
right, that's what it would have been. Widescreen. Hello? Don, if you're talking, I can't hear you. Okay, so I'm not the only one that can't hear. Okay, and he's gone again. So Infinity War Thanos would have gone through the character arc of realizing, since everyone is trying to get the stones back, like he would have kept them, is hiding them, is on the run in the galaxy. So the Guardians of the Galaxy and the remainder of the Nova Corps and the Ravagers teamed up, formed the Guardians of the Galaxy Corps as a general idea there. They're trying to hunt him down with the help of the new Avengers, who are also on Earth, trying to keep some stability in the world because it's total chaos and riots and all that stuff. And Thanos would have realized what he did in the actual end game, which is that he has to destroy the whole universe and remake it so people will be thankful for what he's done. Because if he leaves one half alive, there will be those that seek to set things back to the way they were, which in his mind would lead to absolute destruction. And that was kind of my whole general concept and idea for that end game. And it would have given the characters, like, I know the original Avengers would have gotten a send off, but I think letting the new team, like the other characters, effectively get a little more screen time and a little more development, and kind of see them grow from this. And I also want, and the reason why I kept the Hulk here was so we could see, if we have to play with the Professor Hulk thing, then we see I'm not sure because again, I was going off original Endgame Thanos, which was like a younger version of Thanos who was a lot more angry and stuff. I don't know if it's specified. It's been a while since I've seen Endgame, so forgive me if I'm not clear on it. I honestly think it would be the latter instead of the former, but I'm not too sure, Giant Turtle. Um, I, I think a lot of characters who got snapped in the original had a lot more potential to develop from the events of Endgame, like in terms of like the snap and stuff and all that. So that's why I kind of did it. Like I was looking at them and like how their characters would like grow and adapt if they had survived instead of the others. So well, okay, since Stone isn't here at the moment, I'll just move on with my number 4. Just so like we're not just waiting here. Could go for more of a dystopian. Yeah, that could be interesting. Giant Turtle. All right, so my fourth pick for like one of my top 10 favorite superhero movies is the Batman 2022. Um, well, I made it pretty clear when I did the review for it way back when. Hey, welcome. You're welcome. Um, I like it because it's it's a side of Batman that we don't really see often in like other movies. Is like the detective, the intellectual. I mean, as for there were moments like in the Dark Knight trilogy, but very few, and it never really felt too like like Batman didn't work hard to get the answers for that. So, but here it just feels like a genuine detective story, which fits well for Batman. You know, world's greatest detective and all that. Um, Granted, he does make mistakes, and his worldview is flawed at the time because you know it's his second year. He's pretty young still as a hero, has a lot of growing up to do and stuff, and that's fine. Um, and it and the world is like grandiose, but also very grounded in the sense that it feels like real. Like Gotham feels like a city I could visit if I was suicidal, mind you. Um, Music fantastic and cinematography is superb. Like one of the best I've seen in a superhero movie in a long time. Um, and again, I will always voice my frustration that this feels like a perfect introduction to a DC universe, and floors me to no end that Matt Reeves is refusing to let this be part of something bigger, because it just feels like it should be. But yeah, it's a genuinely good movie. That actually has like a lot of heart and creativity and just effort put into it. And I am legitimately stoked for the next film to come out. Okay, we'll move on to my number 3 because that's pretty much all I have to say on terms of the Batman 2022. All right, my number 3. Yeah, that's the most recent one, Dragon Turtle. My number 3 is Kick-Ass. I don't know if anyone else has seen this movie. I know it was a big movie when it came out. But I legitimately enjoyed this movie. It's actually like one of the first, not one of the first, but it was one of like the. Okay, yeah, I saw this when it came out actually. So, okay, it came out in 2010. I would have been about 9, going on 10 towards the end of the year. So, no, 10 going on 11.
Okay, I have returned, but I have absolutely no idea how long this is going to last, so I don't know if we want to cut it early or what, because I have no idea if/when it's going to cut out again.
All right. You know what, Jonah Arts? Yeah, I think we'll take the answer for the riddle, just because, well, Dawn's on a timetable, and I am not smart enough to figure out the whole answer.
Out of curiosity, what was the riddle?
The
Hoping that my battery lasts long enough for me
the
to...
Jack and Jill one.
Ah.
Pail of Water is the man, Jack and Jill are his dogs, and Pail of Water is the man. Jack and Jill are his kid. Oh, sorry. Or Pail of Water is the man, Jack and Jill are his kids. Okay.
Okay. I don't know how we were supposed to, like, normally riddles are supposed to be intelligible once you know the answer. I'm not sure from where we're supposed to get the information that they were his kids. Anyway, I don't know about you, but I don't want to sit here fighting with my phone for another 2 or 3 hours, so I don't know if we want to cut it or what. It seems relatively stable now, but then again, I thought that the last time, and it didn't stay stable, so...
Yeah, I guess we'll call it. Hopefully we can have this issue fixed by next Saturday then. I guess we'll extend a bit of it, because I really don't think there's any, like, there hasn't really been any news lately. So if anything comes up, we'll add it to next week, but if not, we'll just do the video next week then that we had planned. And don't cut out again. Okay. And so with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, advidase, sayonara, peace, cheers, and shalom and fuck off.